Okay, folks, let's get back to it. Well, let's get started. Happy Halloween, everyone. Officially, happy Halloween. Hopefully everyone has a fantastic, wonderful time this evening. Be safe in whatever it is that you're doing. I want to make sure I see you back next Wednesday afternoon. It's a great time of year for us. Halloween is the one day of the year where we honestly just get to let our hair down, as they say, and just relax and be silly for an evening. So take the opportunity. Take the opportunity. It's okay to be silly, even if it is just for one evening. So please make sure you go out, have a good time, and whatever that you're doing, just make sure that you have fun. Oftentimes Halloween is a great opportunity for a lot of adult parties, okay? So please be careful on the roads out there tonight. Not that you guys are going to be wild and crazy and drinking like nuts, but make sure that you're mindful that other people are, okay? And if you are being wild and crazy and, having some good old-fashioned adult fun, that's good too. Just don't do anything you're going to regret tomorrow, okay? So please be safe. Be safe. I want to make sure that everyone survives the holiday without too many issues. This week, we're going to do something really kind of fun, okay? And we're going to make a jack-o'-lantern. Since today is Halloween, I thought it might be fun just to make a good old little jack-o'-lantern. However, the technology that we're going to use to create our jack-o'-lantern is pretty neat. We're going to talk about two unique systems today inside of Modo that will allow us to create a darn good looking jack-o'-lantern without a lot of fuss and fuss. So we're going to talk about a system called Mesh Fusion. Now, Mesh Fusion, I'm kind of opening Pandora's box to a certain degree, okay? Because Mesh Fusion allows us to do live Boolean operations inside of a model, okay? Now, we've been looking at Booleans over the last couple of weeks, but the Mesh Fusion Boolean system requires us to be very disciplined 3D modelers, okay? So this absolutely gets filed under the only you can prevent forest fires. A lot of the problems that bubble to the surface when using the Mesh Fusion system come from unsupported mesh types, okay? So you have to be careful. This is why I'm live streaming it today, so you guys can get a good, nice visual refresher of the sequence that we need to go through in order for the Mesh Fusion system to work correctly, okay? And if Mesh Fusion is working correctly, it opens a lot of doors and a tremendous amount of possibilities for us as 3D modelers, okay? Once we get done with the Mesh Fusion stuff, we're going to take a little break, and then we're going to come in and start talking about the Mesh Sculpting System that's inside of Modo. And I think you're really going to dig it. It's going to allow us to take our raw pumpkin and start infusing a tremendous amount of surface detail on the outside of our pumpkin to create a nice photorealistic 3D model of a pumpkin, okay? So it should be a pretty fun, engaging day today, so let's just kind of jump in. Okay, so I'm going to do 8 things at once today. I apologize. So here's what we're going to start off by looking at. We're going to look at the base structure, the underlying architecture of Mesh Fusion. Now, we've been working with Booleans over the past couple weeks, and Mesh Fusion is fundamentally different, okay? Unlike our Boolean system that we worked off of with the windows and the doors for our house, Mesh Fusion is an item-to-item Boolean system. And each of these items is live, so any change that we make to one of the root assets inside of Modo will kind of cascade throughout the entire Boolean operator. It's pretty neat. Now, I think just to kind of get a good understanding of what it is that I'm talking about, I'm going to do a really quick demo of what this looks like, and then we'll unpack it and look at all the individual pieces, because you guys have never probably heard of Mesh Fusion up until about 5 minutes ago. So I think you need to see it live in action for you to go, oh, I get it now. I see which direction we're going. And then we'll look at how we can actually physically construct a system that supports the Mesh Fusion architecture. So let me just do it real fast. I'm actually going to close the door. The light, would you mind closing the door for me, please? Thank you so much. The light pollution coming in and out of the door is pretty extreme at the moment. So, it's one of the unfortunate side effects of having a dark interface. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a simple little sphere, okay? There it is, our simple little sphere. And I'm just going to transform it into a different subdivision surface type. Like I said, I'm going to come back and talk about this in detail in a second. But I want you to see it live and in action first before we start looking at the specifics. So let's name this thing. Okay. And now, on a different mesh item, I want to put a cube. And I'm just going to transform that cube. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. I'm literally going to make a square hole in my little sphere. Okay? Now, traditionally, this would be a pretty difficult thing for me to model while maintaining the perfect curvature of the sphere and the perfect square nature of the hole itself. This is a tough model to create, but thanks to the loveliness of Mesh Fusion, we can create this pretty quickly. Now, one of the big component parts that we have to remember when working with Mesh Fusion is that it requires our models, all of the operators inside of this network, to be subdivision surfaces. Okay? Now, we've walked away from talking about subdivision surfaces over the last big project, but I think it's important that we kind of revisit these ideas, right? What is a subdivision surface? You got it. It divides the geometry, right? It takes one polygon and actually transforms it into 4 polygons. But at the same time, it also puts the surface under tension, right? In my imagination, like a little miniature black hole is created at the center of our mesh. And all the polygons start to bend into form as they're being sucked into the center of this gigantic black hole. Okay? Does anyone remember the keyboard shortcut that allows us to enable and disable tab? Yeah, the algorithm. There it is. You hit the tab key, and this is what happens to our mesh. It deforms, it bends, and all the flat planar surfaces now start to warp and change their shape inside of our scene itself. Now, this is cool, and there's some big benefits of this, but I want to be able to influence this. In order for Mesh Fusion to work, all of the operators need to be subdivision surfaces. Requirement, okay? Fundamentally will not work if our shapes are traditional polygons, okay? So we need to change some things. We need to go in and start transforming this thing back into a subdivision surface. But I don't want it to look like that when I hit the tab key. I still want it to look generally kind of like a square. Okay? Now, in order for us to do that, does anyone remember what we need to add to my square in order for us to reduce the impact of the sub-D algorithm? Yeah, more edges. And you guys are right, just slicing. We need to add some more edge loops into the mix here. Now, for a square, and let me just turn the visibility of my wireframes back on. Now, for a square like this, I think I'm just going to use the loop slice tool. So Alt-C, and let's look at the tool properties. I'm going to change the count to 2 and a mode to symmetry. That way I do the tops and the bottoms at the exact same time. Yep. I'm just dragging inside the viewport. There's one loop done, so that's that loop sliced in half, or sliced up, excuse me. Now I need to do it 2 more times. So I'm going to go this loop along the x-axis. Same thing, Alt-C to run loop slice. And then left click and drag to put the loops generally where I want. Now specifically what I'm trying to do here is that I'm trying to create this polygon here in the corner. I'm trying to get it so it's generally a square. This is not a hard and fast rule. This is just Pat's OCD coming into play here. Yes, sir?
So how did you get the slices to be on top like that?
Yeah, so I'm just loop slicing. That's all I'm doing. Okay. So it's dependent on how you loop. Let me go back in time, a couple steps here. The order in which you select the polygons is going to determine the loop that's sliced. Okay. So I'm selecting this one here and this one. If you're ever curious as to which loop the computer is going to slice, what keyboard shortcut allows us to select a loop? L. Okay. There it goes. So now we can see the loop that's about to be sliced. It's the one that kind of runs around the y-axis on my little rectangle here. Alt-C will activate loop slice, and I'm just going to put some new edges in there, right around there. So I did that one. Now I'm going to go back down the other direction, this way. So I'm going to select those and hit L. Yep. So I'm slicing that way now. Same idea, loop slice, count of 2. And then last but not least, we have the row that goes this way. So there's really 3 slices that we need to go and perform in here to get the desired result. So now when I hit the tab key, what should we expect to see? That crazy football-looking shape? No. Now we're going to see something that looks like a square. Okay? By adding these additional edge loops into the mix, we reduce the impact of the algorithm where the edges are the closest, so right in here. The algorithm is always going to be applied to the totality of our geometry, but we impact its kind of visible influence by adding these additional edge loops into play here. Okay. All right. So all of our geometry, every last bit of it, needs to be a sub-D object. There's actually two different algorithms that we get to play with here inside of Modo. We've just been hitting tab, which is handy dandy, right? This is a good one to do. This is the Foundry's implementation of the sub-D algorithm. There's actually a better algorithm, a much better algorithm that we want to take advantage of, and it's called the Catmull-Clark sub-D algorithm. Now, the Catmull-Clark sub-D algorithm, it actually used to be called something a little bit different about 4 years ago. It used to be called the Pixar algorithm, right? It's called Catmull-Clark because Ed Catmull he's the dude that wrote it. And Ed Catmull and Alvy Clark, I believe is his name. They wrote the algorithm way back in the early 80s, okay? And then that algorithm actually became proprietary information of Pixar. Because Ed Catmull, the computer scientist that founded Pixar, one of the 3 founding members of Pixar, that technology, that information, that intellectual property went with him to Pixar. Well, about 3 or 4 years ago, probably more like 4 years ago now, Pixar basically announced to the world, so many people are licensing our algorithm, and it's become kind of a cornerstone of the entire 3D modeling industry. We're just going to open source this thing. So they gave it away for free, and it's, so all the major apps are now have the ability to use the Catmull-Clark sub-D algorithm. It's everywhere. It's in Max, it's in Maya, it's in Modo, it's in Cinema 4D. It's really quite good, and it opens up some really big doors for us. So there's 2 requirements for us to use Mesh Fusion. First and foremost, all of our models must be subdivision surfaces. And the second requirement is that they all must be Catmull-Clark subdivision surfaces. Okay. Now, luckily for us, transforming our mesh from a traditional polygonal object to a subdivision surface object is as easy as just hitting the tab key. Bloop. There we go. If I go into my polygonal selection state, I want you to look very closely at the rollover highlight color of my geometry. When it's an unsubdivided mesh, what's the highlight color? Kind of like a nice little blue, right? You hit the tab key, the highlight color for our selections turns into that color. Is it purple? Is it pink? I don't know, right? It's whatever that color is, okay? However, in order for us to understand if we're using the Foundry's sub-D algorithm versus the Catmull-Clark sub-D algorithm, we hit Shift-Tab. That's what gets us into this playground. And now the rollover highlight is this lovely shade of green, okay? So Tab is going to get us into the Foundry's algorithm, and then Shift-Tab is going to get us into Catmull-Clark's. So all of our geometry needs to be Catmull-Clark subdivision surfaces in order for us to play inside the Mesh Fusion playground. Okay. All right. Let's go back. I'm going to turn my sphere on, and I've already transformed my sphere into a Catmull-Clark sub-D. Same thing. Here's the original polys. Shift-Tab to get into Catmull-Clark's, and we're on our way. I mentioned earlier that this is an item-to-item operation here. So all of the operators inside the Boolean network need to be encapsulated in their own item, okay? They can't be on one item. We're taking the contents from one item and subtracting or adding or a number of other things to another item, okay? So we got to manage this. Cube, sphere, all right, we're ready to rock and roll. So I'm going to turn off my polygonal selection set. When these selection sets on, we're obviously selecting components. But if we were to simply deselect it, now we're selecting the entire container, the entire item. Okay? Mesh Fusion works on items. We need to make sure that we have our sphere selected first. The developer of Mesh Fusion just gave a wonderful, wonderful analogy, a metaphor, if you will, as to how this entire system kind of is structured. Imagine we're at like a manufacturing facility, and we've been handed a gigantic, ball of aluminum, okay? A solid ball of aluminum. And then we're going to be subtracting or adding content in or out of that ball of aluminum. So think of this, we have to have one shape that's going to be the initial billet, if you will, of aluminum, the initial block. I want to use the sphere as my initial one. So this is the first thing that I'm going to select. Okay? All of our fusion tools, and it's dependent on which layout you're in. Of course, we have the beta layout, which generally speaking I would recommend not to use. I find it a little bit more difficult to find some things in here. I'm in the model layout. Point being, the fusion tools are kind of in the same area, but they're different areas in the toolbars, right? So it's in the middle of the toolbar if you're in the beta layout, but if you're in the standard modeling layout, it's way down here at the bottom, okay? So with my sphere selected and my fusion tools exposed to the surface, now we can start creating our new fusion item. So I'm going to click on it. These defaults are just fine. Just leave them all at the defaults. There's only a couple of use scenarios where I would recommend that you turn off the defaults. Leave them on for the most part, okay? And then just select New Fusion with Selected Meshes. Now, if you're following along and your sphere turns into this black wireframe gobbledygook, okay, there are a couple of viewport properties that I would recommend that you change, and it happens way down here at the bottom of our fusion commands. This little divider will allow us to extend the properties of the toolbar, and what we're looking for is one of two things. We can either do that and expose the fusion display sections, or we can just click on this double arrow, which will put the remainder of the fusion commands in a cool little popover. So if you click on viewport settings, it'll smooth shade the fusion item. All right, in our item list, we have a couple things here that are starting to change. The white thing is the new fusion item. So this is a new mesh, okay? It's a procedurally generated mesh that uses the inputs of the rest of our scene to drive the output of the fusion item, okay? You're going to see some green and some pink color coding here in a second, okay? Green means union, pink means subtraction. You'll see this here in a minute. The sphere has been titled or has been color coded green because this is, this is the primary mesh. Okay, this is the base mesh, if you will. This is that solid block of aluminum that I was mentioning before. You can see the colors of the wireframe also green, so a nice kind of visual connection between these two items over here. Now we need to get this cube into the mix here. So again, I'm in item mode. I'm going to select my cube, and now I'm just going to hold down the Shift key and click on my sphere. Okay. What we're doing here is that we're telling the computer that the first thing that we want that we're selecting is going to be subtracted from the second thing. Okay. So let's do it real fast. So again, we start with the cube, hold down Shift, grab the sphere, and now we're going back over here to our fusion Boolean operators. So this top row here is where we're going. This is union, so this is like we'll glue stuff on the outside. This is subtraction. This is difference. We'll talk about this here in a second. And then you can actually clear the tag from the items and kind of get it back to a regular mesh item if you like with this fourth one. So I'm gonna pick this one. And now I have a perfectly square hole inside my sphere. Pretty neat, huh? Mesh fusion is a solid modeling Boolean operator. So it's looking at each one of these mesh items as a solid block. It's very different from a regular mesh item, which is hollow on the inside. Okay? Mesh fusion sees all this geometry as solid on the inside, like it's a solid piece of metal or a solid piece of wood. Okay? Now, what's neat about this, because we can actually get results very similar to this using our traditional Boolean operators here in Modo. But with Mesh Fusion, check this action out. These are live Booleans. So if I went in and selected my cube, okay, that's why they have the wireframes out there. I'm going to hit the Y key to activate the Item Transform tool. Or you can hit the W key to fire up the Move tool. But check this action out. Even scale it up if I want, rotate it, do whatever I want. Live Booleans, right? So it's evaluating the shape as we continue to edit that shape. And it's pretty great. I mean, try modeling that. That would be historically a pretty difficult thing to model. I want to go back over to my Fusion display settings and just turn off the visibility of my source meshes, just so I can see what I have. That's pretty rad. That's pretty cool. Okay. let's kick it up a notch because we can add some more elements into the mix here. Okay. Of course, we're free and encouraged to build our own pieces of geometry that we can enter into the Fusion system. That's fine. However, the developers down at the Foundry have given us a whole library of shapes that are already ready to go. Okay, they're already Catmull-Clark subdivision surfaces. They're already tagged. I mean, you just got to load them in and start building some really cool things. Let me show you what I'm talking about. We're going to go back over into our Fusion tools for a second, and then down towards the bottom, under the Fusion Meshes category, we have this cubic geometry presets. If you click on this button, you're going to get a little flyover menu. And this is a library of assets that are just ready to go. So I'm going to go find one here. Let's find, how about this cylinder long? Simply double-clicking on the preset will load it into your scene. There it is. I'm going to scale this thing down. And I want to make a hole right smack dab through the middle of my weird, wacky shape. So to get it back, to get this shape into the system, of course, like we did earlier, we're just going to start with selecting it first. You can do it over the item list. Hold down the Control key and grab the sphere. You're always referencing back to that initial base, okay? And now we can subtract the long, skinny cylinder from the big sphere. There it is. Goes all the way through. It's pretty cool. Let's turn off the visibility of my source meshes again. How about that? That shape right there would be damn near impossible to make using traditional modeling tools, okay? And if someone comes in, if the art director comes in and says, Pat, I love what you've done, but I need you to make some changes to it, I can go, don't go anywhere, right? Because now I can still go back to my original shapes, like this cube, for example, and I can change its angle. And see how it's still cutting the hole right down the center here? Excuse me, hit the wrong button. There we go. And I'm on my way. Now, we've been looking at the subtractive qualities of our Fusion operators, okay? I'm just going to go back in time. I kind of liked that. It's kind of a weird thing. I want to show you real fast some other options that we have here to get some pretty good results, okay? Of course, we can also glue some items into the outside. To do that, let's do this. I'm going to go back to my cubic library presets, and I think I'm going to get this little cone, this cone thingamajig here. Just double click on it, and in item mode, I'm simply just going to scale this down. Let's look at it from the front here. Create that. I don't know what that is. I'm spitballing here. It's this cool, fun little detail. Okay, let's play with the angle a little bit. There we go. Cool, huh? All right. Looks like a nose. But I want to add a whole bunch of these going around the top of my shape. Okay. So one of the cool things about Mesh Fusion, of course, we can subtract, but we can also glue things onto the outside. This is called a union Boolean, right? Where we're adding shapes in. Same process, right? It's all done in the item list, or we can do it in the viewport. I grab the one that I want to add into my network first, hold down the Control key, grab my base, and now, instead of doing a subtraction, I want to do a union. Okay. Now, it's a member. Let's turn off the visibility of my, there we go. Now it's part of my sphere. If I selected my Fusion item, you can see exactly the polygonal cage that's creating. It gets better. Check this action out. Oops, didn't want to deselect it. Let's go back to the input mesh of that little guy. Make sure I got the right one. Yep, okay. So even though Fusion is an item-to-item level, we still can go in and manipulate, the component pieces of our items at any time. We can go in and just still do direct modeling on our polygons if we'd like. Okay. Like for example, the bottom of this thing. Maybe I want to go in and create the illusion of some sort of. There we go. Just doing some beveling. little scoop or something on the inside. If you look at the raw Fusion operator itself, yep, it's live. It's happening right in front of us. It's gluing all those verts together. Shoot, I could even go in. Maybe I want a whole bunch of those little nubby things going around the top of my model, right? If I change my action center to origin, I'm just going to do a radial array. So duplicate, radial array. That's the wrong axis. There we go. Ta-da! Now I made a little oops. Looks like I had some geometry extending out past it, but you know, for illustration purposes alone, that's pretty neat. That's pretty cool. I want to fix that little nub. I can't not have that in there. There we go. Easy solution. I'll just move it down a little bit and then do the array one more time. Boom. So it's all one piece. It's all a solid object at this moment, okay? And it's all live. So if we wanted to make some changes to it, you know, there's no reason we we can't do that. That's pretty cool, right? I think that's pretty neat. I think it's very neat, actually. Now, we have one more thing that we have to do in here in order for us to get this into a usable asset that we can now start to incorporate into the rest of our production pipeline, okay? Because right now, the Fusion, this mesh, is saved under this item, okay? So there's a couple things in here that we want to do so that we can continue to use this mesh. Oh, I forgot a major thing. I apologize. Every time that we add in a new item into our base, at the intersection of these items, Fusion is creating a small little strip. It's kind of like a little profile of where these two items meet. My only really humongous criticism of the system is that it doesn't update these strips very often. So if you go back over to your Fusion tools and do update strips, it's now going to look at all the different players of this model, and it's going to create a small little outline, a small little strip, that thing right there. Each one of these now has a small little profile that defines the boundary between the base mesh and the operator itself. Each one of them has it, same within here. Okay? Why I bring this to your attention is that we can control the transition at the boundary. Okay? It's pretty harsh at the moment, pretty sharp. Okay? Maybe if I select it, we get this really intimidating palette, and Fusion gives you a tremendous amount of control over these strips. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail today because it's overwhelming, right? However, the easy thing that you need to look at are these three buttons on the inside. This is going to change the width of the strip, the profile shape of the strip. I think this does both at the same time. Let's just do width. So if I click on it, you'll get this little option down here at the bottom where you can interactively change the width. Left click and drag. All left, there it goes. And now we're softening the transition between those two shapes. Let's do it again. Select the boundary, the strip. This is the width property. I can left click and drag on the word, and I can soften. You can actually do multiples at the exact same time. So if you want that one and that one to have the exact same, I clicked off it on accident. There we go. So you can do multiples at the same time if you want some uniformity. That's pretty cool. And try modeling that. That's pretty tough stuff. Okay. Did I ever show you guys that rocket ship I made a while ago? Yeah. Maybe I'll bring it in next week and I'll show you the rocket ship. It was this cool like 1950s style rocket ship. And I did it all with Mesh Fusion, and it worked really well. And it allowed me to iterate and design something that was custom very, very quickly. The output of Mesh Fusion is always going to be quad polygons too, which is great, because now we can incorporate this entire network into a much more complex direct modeling system, which is pretty neat. I really recommend that you take a good solid look at Mesh Fusion. There's some fun things in there. There's a lot of support directly from the developer. So there's a lot of good video resources online, and there's folks like me that spend a lot of time talking about mesh fusion because it's pretty neat. It allows you to do complex stuff very quickly. And you're always going to get an airtight quad polygon mesh, okay? Quad or tris. Sometimes at the boundaries you get some weird triangles, but that's okay because we can retopologize. All right, so there's one final thing that we need to do in here because I want to be able to incorporate, I want to do like materials and maybe I want to sculpt on top of it. There's one final thing that I need to do in here, okay? And that's transform this fusion item into a mesh item. Because right now I can't go in and select any of the polygons on my little doohickey thing. And I'm just going to call it doohickey, right? So I need to go in and transform this into a traditional unreferenced mesh item. And we do that at the bottom of the fusion items properties. So I got my fusion item selected, the white thing in the item list. And then way down here at the bottom, and it is an overwhelming list of properties and things for you to change. There's actually some export properties that will give us the functionality that we're after. It's down here. Dupe and convert mesh. Duplicate and convert to mesh. So let's hit the button. It says, are you really, really sure? Yeah, I'm sure. And there it is. There's the actual mesh itself. So almost all of it's quad polygons. It's got some triangles in there, but there are no n-gons, which is nice. And this is now something that we can go in and continue to model with, sculpt on, add custom materials and textures if we'd like. It's a mesh just like any other mesh inside the architecture. And you can see wherever those strips are, nice quad polygons. And then sometimes when that one kind of got in the way a little bit. I got some bad geo, but that's okay. It'll work nonetheless. Turn off our wireframes, and it looks exactly the way it did a second ago. Cool, huh? If we'd like, this is a great system that we could and probably should use to create the openings for our jack-o'-lantern for our homework this week, right? Because we can create a sphere, then we can create a custom shape for the mouth, and then subtract that mouth shape from the overall pumpkin itself. Yeah, it's pretty fun. It's pretty cool, huh? All right. Questions on how to work with mesh fusion? I think once you start getting your hands dirty with it, you'll start to understand it. But the absolute requirement, okay, and this is a line in the sand when it comes to working with mesh fusion, has to be Catmull-Clark subdivision surfaces. Got to have it. It's not going to work if they're not Catmull-Clarks. Okay? Yeah.
Okay, so I was watching it. I got lost at where you subtracted and where you added that thing on those two things.
Which thing?
Where you added like the nose, almost nose-looking thing on the.
Okay. Yep.
And then where you subtracted, like where you subtracted the cylinder.
Okay. Let's do it. Okay. So I'm back working on my fusion item. Okay. And I was just using some of the mesh presets that come with Modo, right? Let's just do another one. Why not? Let's do, I don't know, let's do a handle. We'll make this thing into an odd-looking coffee cup thing. Or maybe like a key ring or something. I don't know. Okay. Let's go into item mode because we want to do all of our transformations in item mode. And let's do this. I'm going to rotate. Oops. I got two things selected. Let's try that again. There we go. Scale it down. Maybe this could be like a pendant or something. Of course, the arc is not really big enough to really hold the wire or something. Proof of concept, though. Okay. So I want to add that little hook into the outside of my mesh. Okay. So the first thing we got to do, we start with a selection. We start with the new item to be inserted into our fusion network. Okay. The second thing we select is the base. In our case, it's the sphere, the thing that we're gluing this object to. So I can do that by holding down the control key and clicking on sphere. Now we go back to our fusion tools, and I simply just did the first one, the union operator, okay, which is going to glue an object to the outside of an existing fusion item. There it goes. Dun, da, da, da. It shouldn't look too different, and I don't think, yeah, I did a not great job. Let me just go back in time.
So yeah, I got that done now.
Great.
And then the subtraction.
Yep. Let me just finish this real fast. There we go. Okay, now that's glued in there. Okay. If I look at the fusion item itself, okay, now let's get in here. Cool, okay. There it is, that's what I was looking for. Yeah, so that's all glued in. Just looking at the wireframes here. Cool. Now, let's do another one. A subtraction. Let's take, oh, I don't know. Let's take this thing. I'm just moving and rotating it, nothing too fancy here. Okay, now I'm going to subtract that shape from my sphere. Okay, this one first, hold on the control key, grab the sphere. Now I'm going to do subtract. Boom. Cool. Now, what I did to make a whole bunch of these at the top is that I went back to the actual polygons here on this cone thing, and I just did some straight up duplication of the polygons. You can do a duplication of the item, that would work too, right? That would work absolutely fine. You can do that. I'm going to do a duplication of the polygons right around the origin of my three-dimensional scene. And I'm just going to mirror these polygons across the z-axis to duplicate that shape. Cool. It's actually looking kind of fun. I actually kind of like this thing. I don't know what it is. It's abstract art, right? It kind of shows what you can do when you start working in the solid modeling workflow. This is kind of like additive and subtractive modeling, right? We start with the base shape. We can add on top of it. We can also subtract away from it to create something very new, very original, and very unseen. Let's look at my barrel monkeys here. Oops, excuse me. Let's do this. Oops. And I really am just playing right now. It's not every day that I just get to sit here and play. There we go. Let's see what happens now. Throw that into the system, subtract it. See what it looks like. Huh, cool. Why not? Now it looks like a mouth down there with the nose in the front. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. Pretty neat, huh? Pretty neat. Let's duplicate my fusion item, get it out as an unreferenced object. Of course, that happens way down here at the bottom on the dupe and convert to fusion mesh. Create the mesh. And now we have dun, da, 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 an unreferenced traditional mesh item that's not linked to any of its, these pink and green guys. It's true geometry at this point, where I can go in and select the polygons, do whatever I want to the overall shape. Shoot, you can even subdivide it. Cool, huh? Pretty neat. Pretty neatio. So let me show you a use case for this, because we've been making some abstract art. This is something that we can and should use for our little pumpkins this week, okay? Now, earlier, I was starting to make my pumpkin, okay? Let me just walk you through some of my thinking and my ideas behind all this, okay? So here's the blank for my pumpkin. Excuse me, that's not the blank for my pumpkin. There's the blank for my pumpkin, and let me just, oops, there it is, okay. So here's the blank for my pumpkin. This is the outside of my pumpkin. I then duplicated it. Here's the inside, or an inside of my pumpkin. Same object, okay, literally the exact same object. Yeah. It's only showing me my base, so I'll just have to walk you through it. So I created an outside, just a sphere with a beveled top to make the stem. And then I duplicated it, and I whacked off the stem on that duplicate object, and I made it a little bit smaller so it sits kind of inside my pumpkin, right? And then I had this blobby thing. This is just a mesh preset, one of those cubics that I shoved in the center. Here, you know what? Let's just do this. I can show you exactly how this works. Let's just get rid of all of this. Strip the tags, that way you can see it. Okay. All right, so here's my pumpkin, the outside of my pumpkin. Nothing too fancy here. I started with the sphere, and then I just took these outside edge loops, and I scaled them in to make all the ridges going around the outside of my pumpkin. Okay. Once that was done, I duplicated it. I shrunk it down a little bit so that it fits inside the outside of my pumpkin. This is, in every sense, creating the dimension, the thickness of the pumpkin walls. And then I added this little odd shape I found in the cubic library. Generally kind of mouth shape-ish. It's a good start. I'm going to go and make a custom shape here in a minute. But then I started making the actual fusion item itself, and I'll walk you through how all this works, just so you can see it in action, a good use case scenario. So I'll go into item mode. The outside, of course, is going to be the base of my fusion system, right? So I'll create a new fusion item. All right, there we go. And now I'm going to subtract the mouth from the outside. There it goes. If you look real carefully, all it does, it creates a cavity, basically the size and shape of that little arrowhead-looking round blobby thing, right? Which isn't at all what I want, right? I want to create the illusion of thickness. I just carved pumpkins last night with my kids, so I definitely know what this is supposed to look like. So that's where this inside piece comes into play, okay? And with the visibility of it on, let me turn off the visibility of my source meshes, you can kind of get a good sense of how thick the walls of the pumpkin are going to be, right? Grab the inside, hold down the control key, grab the outside, and subtract it from the entire system, and then there we go. Now we've created walls, okay? I've created an inside and an outside of my pumpkin, which is pretty cool, okay? And I'm on my way. Let me update my strips. That way, I can grab that one, and I'm just going to soften it by increasing the width ever so slightly. There we go. Same with this other one over here. Just grab it, increase its width so it's not just a sharp angled edge, somewhere right around in there. And I got the opening of a very scared pumpkin or something like that, right? Of course, naturally, I can continue modeling in here. I don't know if there's a triangle shape. Yeah, this will work. I want triangle eyes. There we go. Those are really big triangle eyes. course, I don't want the eyes dead center. There we go. Okay, so grab that item, grab the outside, and I'll subtract it. And it goes all the way through. That's a cool eye shape. Not at all what I thought it was going to be, but that's okay, because I can easily go in, make some adjustments, kind of get it where I want it to go. This is the power of mesh fusion right here. Doing something like this would be historically very challenging using a direct modeling tool set. And I can make changes on the spot. Okay, we're getting there.
So I'm having a hard time subtracting.
Okay.
It's just giving me a command not.
Okay, help me out. What's the command saying?
Command disabled. That's all.
Command
So
disabled.
It's just grayed out.
Okay, let's take a look.
So I'm trying to do the outside, pumpkin inside, the pumpkin outside to make the.
Perhaps we're in an order of operations problem. What I did is that I did the pumpkin outside, then I did the mouth, then I did the inside. You're probably getting that error
Why would that matter?
because there's nothing.
I didn't want 'em out.
Well, there's nothing to subtract it to, right? There's got to be some sort of intersection between the outside and the inside to create the illusion of thickness, right? If you don't want a mouth, what are you?
I have an outside orb,
Uh-huh.
inside orb.
Right?
Wouldn't I be able to chop that out?
Absolutely. But you have to have something that's going to intersect both the outside and the inside before you can do the inside. Because it has no idea of thickness yet. Yep. So it could just be an order of operations problem.
Give me the third thing. All right.
Yep. Got to have a third thing. That's looking appropriately spooky. Kind of like my pumpkin. It's looking good. So that's the power of mesh fusion. Now the question that really kind of comes up, and this is kind of a traditional modeling, a direct modeling answer to a problem, is what if we want to have like the classic like jack-o'-lantern smile, right? That gets a little bit difficult. But if we use our traditional modeling tool set, it's actually a problem that we can solve pretty quickly. And let me show you kind of my solution to that problem. It's actually not as bad as one may think, okay? So, like everything, to the Googles. Here we go. Boom. Let's find, oh, part of me really wants to do the Stormtrooper one, but I gotta say no. I gotta say no. Here, let's just do the traditional one. This one will be just fine. And I'm going to outright steal this by doing a screen grab. Thank you. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do to get that traditional. I have to have geometry that defines that traditional shape, okay? I'm going to use that pattern that I just took a picture of real fast, and I'm going to recreate that shape using polygons, okay? So let me show you how I would do it. Of course, we're going to do this in the front. I'm going to create a new mesh item, and I'm going to turn off the visibility of my fusion item just temporarily. And shoot, let's just add that picture that I just grabbed as a backdrop item into my scene. There it is, okay? Whoa, that's gigantic. So what I'm going to focus in is this thing over here, okay? Now, there are a lot of ways that we can skin this cat. I'm going to do it the fast way because I know that from time to time, watching someone 3D model is like watching paint dry. It's not exactly the most fascinating thing. But I think we got to remember our core idea here is that we need to have quad polygons for all of quad polygons, Catmull-Clark subdivision surfaces for all of our fusion operators, right? So I need to take this smile and get it into quad polygons pretty fast, okay? I can make curves. Curves are great. I love curves. I'm all about curves. I think I'm just going to use the pen tool with wall mode on to get me into that ballpark pretty fast, okay? It's going to increase the transparency of my backdrop item ever so slightly. And now let's get to work. Okay, so now I'm just going to go to the pen tool. make sure that wall mode is on. This is the size of it. How big is that? Yeah, that's going to do. And now, oops, there we go, turned off wall mode. Now let's see. I'm just going to draw this pretty quickly. And whoops, I'm all zoomed in, so my computer's wigging out. Now I'm going to work on the points a little bit differently. So I'm just going to go right across. Now as I come back down the other side, I'm trying to make this control vert here kind of match up to the exact same partner over here. That way I can create a quad strip in between there. Okay. And this is just the initial block out. So if I mess up or if I find that I need to have more, that's okay. Go. I just need one right about here-ish. There we go. This is all going to be a subdivision surface, so a lot of these faceted edges are going to get smoothed out when we hit Shift-Tab. So I'm not too concerned about the curve, but I am paying some really close attention to structure here. That way all this gets put together quite nicely. There it is. Okay, there's my overall initial shape. Okay, I'm going to get rid, I'll hang on to that just for a second. And now I'm just going to start bridging these edges together. Let's turn off my backdrop item. I'm going to start bridging these edges together real fast. Whoops. Now I did that because continuous bridge and auto connection was on. There we go. That could be a problem. Let's bridge it. There we go. Now I know that I need another slice right in here. There we go. Just using my traditional slicing tools. Nothing fancy, nothing that we haven't talked about before. Now this one's a little bit different because I got this line in here that I need to manage. So I'm going to come back to that here in a second. Sometimes I like just to go through and get the low-hanging fruit done first, right? The easy ones, get the easy ones out of the way. Yeah, the rest of these are pretty straightforward. Go. Okay. Now, in order for me to reconstruct this in here, I need to have an edge going right down the center. If you hold down the control key when working with edge slice, it puts the new vert right smack dab in the middle of the edge that you're trying to slice. And now I can bridge from there to there and from there to there. There we go. So I'm using edge slice here. Hold down the control key, click, click, click. There we go. So now I can bridge from there to there. Got one in the middle here that I'll need to do, but that's fine. I can do that. Or I can just go bridge. Well, I got to slice either way, so it doesn't matter. And now I'll have to just merge those verts. Okay. So if you ever want to merge a vert, it's really easy to do this inside of Modo. I need to take that vert, join it to that one. You can find the join command down over here.
Is that different than the merge tool if you select
It is. It is. Yeah, see how these are pretty far away from each other?
Right.
Okay. The way this works is the one that we select first will be joined to the one that we select second. Just like that. Uh-oh, we got another modeling problem here. And perhaps I just did this wrong. I think I did. I think I just did this wrong. Let me go back in time a couple steps. I put my edges in the wrong spot. So really, this thing needs to go away, because this edge is supposed to go down there. Whoops. Let's merge those verts again. And now I have the structure that I need to do the rest of the bridge. There it is, looking good. One last little bit, and we'll call this one finished. Use edge slice, hold down the control key so I get it sliced right smack dab in the middle. And then I'm just going to start bridging some edges. Oops, I forgot to click in the viewport to apply the bridge tool. I'm going a little too fast all of a sudden. All right, almost finished. So we turn on our backdrop item. We got the little points down here that we need to manage, and this is why I was doing this. I'm just going to change my action center to selection. There it is. Close enough. It goes out a little bit, but that's all right. I don't think anyone's going to notice or care. All right, so up here it's a little bit different. The structure, let me go back in time. That way we can see the structure. So we need to have a polygon with some mitered edges. So really this one is supposed to come up. This one's supposed to come up. And we're going to bridge from there to there. And then we're going to slice from there to there. Let's make sure all of these are nice and joined. Join them up. Yeah, now we have an identical structure on both sides, one of which that we can very easily change to get what we're after. Yep, that's good enough for me. I won't go to an extreme point, although I could. I think for today I'll just keep it pretty simple, something like that. There it is. There's my structure. That's the foundation for my little Halloween smile. Now I just need to extrude it out. Shift X, make it into a big piece, and I'm almost there. I'm almost ready to transform this or to incorporate this into my Fusion network. Okay, because I need to make this a subdivision surface. So Shift Tab. I want to add some interior loops in here, just to kind of shore up the edges a tad. Also gets me some more geometry. I can add some more geometry in here if I'd like to start shoring up those edges, make them a little bit tighter. Since this is all quad geometry, we're free to do this. Oops, excuse me. I'm just doing a loop slice here. Yeah, I'm getting some pinching down here at the bottom, but for illustration purposes, I'm going to keep going. Pat's OCD is going crazy right now. I do have a solution to fix this, but that's a 20-minute conversation. I don't think we're all ready. I don't think we have the capacity to do that today. But let's get this into our Fusion system now. Oh, it's gigantic, so we need to make this much. So that's a big mouth. So let's scale this down. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to center it at the origin of my scene. That way, it makes it a little bit easier to control. There we go. And then I'll go into item mode and start to position it where I want it to go. Now I need to get rid of the old mouth, which is this guy. So I'm in item mode. If I go to my Fusion tools, you can remove any item from the Fusion network just by going to this section in the Fusion tools. Clears the tag. You can see that it goes away. Here's my crazy mouth. I think that's what I'm going to call it, just crazy mouth. Because it is kind of crazy, is it not? I'm not 100% confident. No, it does go all the way through. not in all spots. This is not a perfect mesh. Really, this raw shape should match the curvature of the sphere. I could do that, but I'm not going to do that right now. That's I could bend and deform it into the shape that I'm after. But I think just for illustration purposes, I'm going to keep going here. So, however, I do need to make it a little wider. I'm going to grab all these back polygons, just make them a little bit bigger. And now, with our fusion network going, looking through the eyeballs, yep, that looks good. That's a silly looking guy. I like silly, especially on Halloween. Let's subtract it. There it is. There's my guy. It's a cute little jack-o'-lantern. Cute little jack-o'-lantern. Pretty cool, huh? Pretty cool. There's a lot of really great stuff inside of Modo that makes our modeling lives a whole lot easier. The Fusion System is one of those tool sets that takes a little bit of practice. I want to give you some time in class today to start working on your jack-o'-lantern. We're also going to talk, we're going to take a break here in a second, and after the break we'll talk about our sculpting tools, which is also another great system, another great way for us to create some really great high-resolution geometry that will be perfect for your jack-o'-lantern. So let's take a break. Take a small little 5-minute break. All right. So, one of the things that you guys will run into, Pedro just ran into this, and I want to talk about it real fast, is materials. Because remember, when we're working with Mesh Fusion, all the geometry that's in this system is part of the Fusion item itself. Okay, so we need to get these, all of this jazz, everything that's referenced by this Fusion item, out of the Fusion item and into a traditional mesh item, so that we then can now start to run it through our normal material setup. Okay, our simple material pipeline. We can't really apply materials until they're true polygons. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to, again, return to my Fusion item. Okay, I got it selected, and then down here in our Fusion properties, and it's a long list of properties, I get it, okay? Down at the very, very bottom, we want to duplicate and convert the Fusion item to a traditional unreferenced mesh item. Just hit yes. It says, are you sure? Yeah, I'm really sure. And then the outcome of that is going to be, let me just turn off some of my source meshes here. This is from earlier. Here we go. There it is. Ta-da! Now we have geometry that's, that can be a member of our traditional material setup. Okay? So now we could absolutely go in and start adding, very simple textures, very simple materials, and see how we can use our lighting engine to continue to sculpt this thing with light. Okay? Because now over here, let's check it out real fast. Now we can very quickly, and I mean very quickly go and make some material selections and start to get this, working the way I want it to work. Okay, so let's just do it real fast. There's the outside. Maybe I want, the outside color of pumpkins are kind of like a dark orange, and the inside color is a lighter orange. Okay, so maybe I want to start playing around with that idea a little bit. Yeah, let's just do it real fast. So hit the M key. Let's call this dark orange. There we go. I really hate these label colors. There we go. Okay, so now if you look at what we got going on, all of these in here, these come from those mesh presets. Okay, you can delete them. They're not really necessary. There's dark orange. Of course, I want to make it yellow. No, I'm going to make it dark orange. A nice pumpkin-y orange, somewhere right around there. That's cool. I'm going to select by material, and then I'm going to convert it by holding down the Option key into polygons. Now, the reason I'm doing this is just to simply make a very simple inverse selection of all the polygons that are inside. And I'll hit the M key. I'll call this light orange. Let's give it a nice color. Cantaloupe, why not? Yeah, there we go. Now let's look at it in the render. Open up good old preview. Starting to look pretty good. Now I need to go in and do the stem. I'm not going to do the stem at the moment, but at the very least, now that we have traditional raw polygons, we have something that we can work with in here. Okay. Kim was asking some really cool questions earlier about bump mapping, and this is a great place to continue that conversation. Now for bump maps, we need to have some sort of image inside of Modo that will create the illusion of height. Okay? And there are a lot of different places where you can find these images. Textures.com, as we talked about last week, is a really great resource for us. If you went over, you can find some images you can very quickly use. I think I'm going to use a procedural texture, something that we can create here inside of Modo. We don't always have to go to textures.com or the Googs to get what we're after. We can actually create textures here inside of Modo. They're called procedurals. I'm going to go Add Layer, and they're down here. There's actually a couple of them. These are some really crazy ones. Okay, these are difficult to visualize. I always go to the documentation to see some thumbnails of what all these looks like, the enhanced Modo textures. But there's some good stuff in here. Under noise, let's do Bozo. That looks pretty good. Now we don't want it to affect the diffuse color values. We want it to affect our surface shading and bump. Yeah, and now we're getting some surface relief in there. one of the things I may think to do under my texture layers section is start to adjust some of these values. Now with procedural textures, the cool thing about them is that they're basically being generated by an algorithm, okay? And we get to control that algorithm very directly. So the background colors, the background values, these are all things that we get to manipulate. We can even go in and change the pattern if you'd like, okay? That's where this frequency and all the increment and all that jazz comes into play. So we have a tremendous amount of control over how all this looks. Experiment, explore. The bias and the gain values, these are good places to start in every sense. This is brightness, this is contrast, okay? So if I just made it a little bit more contrasty, yeah, now it's looking a little bit more chunky, okay? I may have overdriven it a little bit too much. Point being is that we're in the driver's seat here, and that's looking a little bit too denty for me. But maybe we change the frequency of this a little bit, get more of them. That's wonderfully not good for a pumpkin, but point being is that we can experiment, okay? So perhaps the bozo one is not my guy. Let's explore some other ones. Let's do lump. Ooh, that could be fun. Why not? Yeah, now it's got some texture in there. Again, I'm not entirely convinced that's kind of pumpkin-y, but something is better than nothing, okay? One of the cool things about these procedural textures, and all textures for that matter, is that you can layer them on top of each other. We're not limited to just having one of these impact our entire material setup here. So let's do one more. Let's go back. Let's do something like scar. Scar is very similar to the previous one, so that one's out. Let's try another one. Let's do pebbles. Hey, actually, I really like pebbles. This is kind of getting me close to where I wanted to go, right? Because we're trying to go for a pumpkin. Clearly, I don't want it to be black and white spots. I want this to be used for surface relief. Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't look too hot at the moment, but that's okay, right? That's okay. It looks just, and this is the part of being part of the artistry, if you will, of being a 3D artist, is that we want to layer all of these assets on top of each other. We're never, ever going to find one asset that checks all the boxes just perfectly for us, right? Often it's a whole bunch of individual pieces that we're not going to have to stack on top of each other and blend to get the result that we're after. Okay? So let me show you what I'm talking about, because we can blend these things really easily, okay, using our blend modes. So I want to change my diffuse color. You know what I think I'm going to do, just for illustration purposes only? I'm going to go back to my lump layer, okay? And I want to change its effect back to, not displacement, excuse me, diffuse amount, or diffuse color, okay? Because sometimes it's probably the easiest to understand these blend modes when we're just working with diffuse color. And then we'll change them all back to bump, okay? Because I want to see a little bit of these lovely dots, but I also want to see this really cool veiny pattern underneath it, okay? So we're going to start blending these elements together. So I'm going to go to Pebbles, and under my Texture Layers section, check it out, we have some blend modes. Now we don't want to just change the opacity, we actually want to take certain color values of the Pebbles layer and make them transparent. So the change in the opacity just globally reduces the transparency of every pixel on the entire layer. But the blend modes make certain values transparent and other ones opaque. So I think for this one, let's take a look at it. Let's turn Pebbles back on. I want to have all the white circles stay, but all the black kind of be disappeared. So I know from my experience that that is going to be the screen. Okay, the screen blend mode. Screen is going to make all the black disappear. All the white is going to stay the same. There we go. Now if you look very carefully, yeah, I still get the white from Pebbles, and then the veiny texture from the other one, I've forgotten its name, underneath it. Let's change both of those layers inside of my shader tree to bump. We'll see what we get. Yeah, there we go. It's beginning to look a little pumpkin-y. I still got some work to do in here. but at the very least, we're taking multiple assets and starting to blend them together to give me a really nice complex result. Okay. Neat, huh? That's Pat's Moto shading tip of the day, working with procedurals. You can actually create a tremendous amount of content pretty quickly using the procedural procedural texture engine inside of Moto. It's pretty great. That's funny. Okay. Last thing that I want to talk about today is our sculpting tools. Okay. And I think to probably best illustrate our sculpting tools, here's what I would like us to do. Make a new mesh item real fast. Okay. And specifically, I think what I want to do is that I want you guys to how about just make a cylinder. Okay. Make just a simple cylinder within the scene itself, and then we're going to explore sculpting tools and how we can make a candle that will go inside of our little pumpkin. Okay. Let's check it out. Let's jump back over into Moto real fast and see what we can do. All right. So I'm going to turn off the visibility of a couple things. And I'm going to return to my basic collection of tools. And let's do this. I'm going to create a new cylinder. Let me turn on my wireframes. There we go. All right. So let's talk about the mesh sculpting tools inside of Moto. It's pretty great. They're actually really, really, really easy to use. I hope that you enjoy them. We have a really great brush-based system inside of Moto that will allow us to, start to sculpt and push these verts around interactively inside of our three-dimensional scene. Let me show you where we can find all of these tools. So I'm going to work on my cylinder. If you go over into your layout section over here, this little button is going to bring open all of your sculpting tools. Okay. Now there's a couple of them that I want you to look at. I'm not going to go through all of these sculpting brushes today. I hope you spend some time getting really familiar with them because there's some really good technology in here that will allow us to organically push and pull and move these verts around inside of the scene. I think before we get started, it's a really important idea to remember that when it comes to working with the sculpting tools inside of Moto, you're not actually adding geometry. What you're doing is that you're moving the existing geometry. But you're moving it in a way that's incredibly organic. Okay? You're not like selecting a vert and moving it, grabbing a whole series of verts and moving it with a brush, which gives you a very cool result. Okay? Let's take a look-see at it. All right. So I'm going to grab the push brush, okay? There's two things that we need to have enabled and active for any of our sculpting brushes. We have the brush itself, and then we also need to make sure, it should come on default, that we have a tip selected down here. Now, these are the two tips that I recommend that you start with. However, I would recommend checking out all of this stuff. Some of these really aren't designed for the sculpting engine. They're really more designed for the paint engine, but you can use them. I'm going to use this nice soft brush tip. The right mouse button, if we were to hold down the right mouse button and drag, it's going to change the diameter of our brush tip. Okay, we can see the shape of our brush tip underneath the mouse cursor. And now, check it out. Wherever I drag, the existing verts inside of my model are being pushed around. Okay. Holding down the Shift key while any of the sculpting tools are on will allow us to smooth out our geometry. Okay? It can be kind of destructive, so we want to make sure that our offset percentage, okay? I really wish the developers down at the Foundry would just change this word offset to strength, okay? You can find that downstairs in your sculpting HUD, okay? It's just a fancy word for strength. At a value of 50%, that's intense, okay? You're manipulating your geometry pretty intensely. I like to keep this down low, somewhere in the low teens, okay? That way I'm just pushing it out, and then I'm smoothing it out, okay? I like to be able to control this. So we're not adding new geometry here. We're just manipulating and moving the geometry that's already there. Now, we don't have enough geo on my little cylinder here to really do anything. It's kind of low res. The results are going to look pretty poor every single time, okay? There's a couple things we need to look at. I'm going to drop my tool by hitting the space bar. This polygon up here at the top is giving me some very undesirable results, okay? In order for me to sculpt, we have to have some verts, right? We're just pushing and pulling these verts around our scene. This gigantic n-gon there is causing some problems for us. So how can I solve this solution? What are some ways that we can go in and very quickly add some geometry up at the top of my scene so that I can sculpt the top of my little candle? So you bevel it in, create some manually do it. That's a great way of working. Absolutely, that will work. What's another way that we can add some geometry up here at the top of my mesh? Loop slice? Kind of work. Let me show you a great tool that will, I think, solve a lot of modeling problems. Because we don't want to have n-gons as much as we can, right? N-gons are okay when we're roughing out a basic shape. But at the end of the day, especially with our sculpting tools, we're going to need to go in. And we're going to need to add some quad geometry in there. So I'm going to delete that n-gon up here at the top of my scene. Backspace, bye-bye. And I'm going to go into my edge selection state and select that boundary edge. Okay? If we travel over to our edge collection of tools, and we've got to be in our modeling toolbox to get there. Here's our edge collection of tools. We have a great tool down here called Fill Quads. It's going to look at the selection, and it's going to try its best to put a whole series of quad polygons in that selection. Let's just do it real fast. You get a simple little popover that says fill with grid pattern. Always leave this on. Like seriously, you never have it off. It is going to make a nightmare. It's going to make more problems than it's going to solve, right? And it's just, I'm sure there's a function for it. I just don't know why you'd want to have that function off. Because with it on, look at the result that you're going to get. All quads up at the top. Okay? And now with a whole series of quad polygons, I'll do the same thing here at the bottom before I go and walk away from it. And once we have quad polygons at the top and the bottom, now we can go in, fill quads. Now we can go in or return to our sculpting tools and really start to push and pull these verts around and control it the way we want to control it. Okay? But we still don't have a lot of geometry in here, right? It's still relatively low res. I'm only working on 720 polygons. There's not enough verts in my candle to give me good results. I want a whole bunch of geometry so I can go in and sculpt like some drips, maybe some different shape changes and stuff. All possible and very encouraged. You should do this. Something very easy and encouraged to do here inside of Modo. Okay? So there's a couple things that we should look to do. In all honesty, I'm going to go back in time. Get back to it. I could just make a new cylinder, but I'm just going to hit undo 1,000 times here. There we go. Oh, almost. Get rid of those things. Fill it one more time. Just some housekeeping stuff here. There we go. Okay, so in all honesty, what I need in here is a lot of geometry, some extra resolution. Okay? But I don't want to do what's often referred to as a destructive edit. Okay? Ultimately, I want to keep the raw polygonal shape as this, 360 polygon. It's a pretty manageable shape. But I want to dynamically add more resolution into my system here so that I can sculpt a much higher resolution on top of my model, but retain the flexibility of a, what? 720 polygon shape. Okay? I would like that very much. Okay? So there's one kind of addition to our sculpting workflow that I want to throw in here that really truly makes it a powerful system. And it's called multi-resolution sculpting. It's one option that we need to enable inside of our sculpting tool set. Let's just take a look-see at it. Okay? I'm going to go back into my sculpting toolbox. And let's just turn on the push tool. And it's way down here at the bottom. Multi-resolution. Okay? I want to enable this. Now, this is the point of no return. Once you turn on multi-resolution, you really can't turn it off. Because the moment that you turn it off, all of this wonderful sculpting data is going to disappear. Okay? So you need to be mindful of this. Only you can prevent forest fires. Okay? I have told you that if you turn this off, all of this stuff, poof, magically goes away. Okay? It's magical in its function. Let's explore it a little bit. There's two things that we can control. Oops. And it's saying, hey, do you want to do this Catmull Clark's? Yes, we have to have Catmull Clark sub Ds in order to do this. Okay. there's two things that we can do in here. We can dynamically increase the subdivision rate. And we've talked about this before when we had our conversation about subdivision surface modeling. The subdivision rate determines how many times or how many polygons are added to each polygon when you subdivide it, right? Because when you hit the tab key, one polygon turns into 4, and then if you increase the subdivision rate, those 4 go into 16, right? And then 16 into 64, we kind of exponentially increase the number of polygons when we increase the subdivision rate or level. With multi-resolution Sculpt and Enable, we can dynamically increase and decrease that rate. So check it out. I'm going to put this to 4. Shoot, let's just break moto and put it at 5. Okay. Now at a subdivision level of 5, my push brush, okay, actually I'm going to take a step back and I apologize. Okay. I'm actually going to walk back down to subdivision level 2. You can do this down in your HUD, by the way. These will add and subtract subdivision levels, and this will change the current rate, the current level of your mesh. So if I go down to subdivision level of 2, I'm only sculpting on 11,000 polygons at the moment. I know this because it tells me my GL counter down here in the lower right-hand corner. Okay. So maybe I want to go in and write my name. Let me hit undo. Make my brush a little bit smaller. I'm also going to increase the offset of my push brush so it pushes it out a little bit more. It's kind of difficult. It's getting kind of chunky. It's not working out too well because there's just not enough resolution in here to give me a good result. But it is. Can you guys see my name in there? Okay. We need more resolution. Now, if I were, I'm going to hit undo. If I go up to subdivision level of 5, now I have 337,000 polygons on my little cylinder. And I can pump out a tremendous amount of detail. Now I can write my name very clearly. You can see what's going on. Okay.
Is there a way to smooth that?
There is. Right now, I'm using the hard edge brush tip. I'm not using the soft one. So to answer your question, yes. And I'm going to turn off the visibility of my wireframes too. There we go. Of course, I'm doing this with a mouse. There it is. Okay. Now, the cool thing about this multi-resolution sculpting is that I don't have to stay at level 5. We want to do all of our fine detailing work at level 5 or at level 6, where we have a couple million polygons for us to play with. But when we animate, when we rig, I don't want to be rigging a 8 million polygon mesh, right? I can go back down to level 1. I can do all my rigging here, and then when I render it out, my name will show up on the mesh. This is the power of subdivision surfaces, is that we can dynamically increase and decrease the rate, okay? And it saves all of this information inside of the database, okay? So let's say, because now the OpenGL viewer is only having to manage, basically just under 3,000 polygons. That's nothing, okay? I can get really fast performance. I can rig really easily. I can do all my deformation really easy. I can have this be a member of some sort of dynamic simulation. At this quality level, this is a pretty light mesh to work with. But when I render, okay, I want to see the most detail that I possibly can, right? I want to see the highest level of detail. Check it out. I got my cylinder item selected in my item list. And one of the properties that we can adjust on the surface section is the render level. See how I'm currently working at render level or subdivision level 1, 2,800 polygons. But when I render, I want to render at level 5. Okay. So now when I hit the good old preview, I got a tool active, which is why it's not working. There it is. It's usually at this stage where people go, Pat, you're lying to me, right? I don't see your name in here at all, right? Believe it or not, we're not actually, this is a preview of the render, right? You won't actually get the maximum or the defined subdivision rate until you hit F9. Okay, check it out. So I just hit F9, and now we can see my name written in the side of the cylinder. Okay, this makes it a very fluid kind of process. We can add a tremendous amount of sculpted geometric detail in here, and then determine when we see and when we manipulate that, when we render, which is pretty cool. So let me fire off the push brush again. I'm going to walk back up to level 5, and I'm going to start, getting rid. I'm going to smooth some of this out. A couple things about my sculpting system, or the sculpting system. Of course, doing the left mouse button will allow you to push out. Okay. If you hold down the control key, it will do the opposite of any brush that you have selected. So if you hold down the control key, now we're pressing in. Okay. So control will do the negative. Just left mouse button and drag will do the positive. Okay. I'm not going to go into every single one of these, but there are some Rockstar brushes that I would recommend that you check out. Let's do this. Just do a really big stroke here. Okay. Tangent pinch is a really good one. I'm a fan of tangent pinch because tangent pinch is going to pull the geometry together. You can make some really great creases and folds. Shoot, sometimes I do this often. I grab the move brush. I like the move brush. I use the move brush often, right? Because the move brush will allow us to just organically change the shape based off of a brush. And sometimes you can get some really, really great results. My brush is a little too small. There we go. That's what I was looking to do. Okay. So if we go into tangent pinch, I can pinch that corner there. I start bringing out that planar shape. Now I think I'm doing it a little too extreme, so I bring my offset down a little bit, make my brush a little bit bigger. Yeah, and now I'm just sharpening up that plane change right there. This in here is turning into a nice kind of chiseled edge, which is nice. Again, something that would be traditionally very difficult to model. So tangent pinch is going to pull the verts towards the center of the brush and try to pinch it together, which is pretty cool. Another one that I use pretty frequently is the clay brush. I like the clay brush. Okay, it's just a different fall off. It's a little bit more of a square shaped brush versus a circular shaped brush. So experiment with the tools, find one that works for you, and I think you'll really be into it. One of the things that's challenging when working with the sculpting engine is understanding your sculpt, especially with the default shading style. Okay, let me extend it ever so slightly, and this is something that you can do at any level just for you to help understand what it is that you're making. Because oftentimes the hardest thing for 3D modelers is just to consume your model, just to understand how all of these shapes and these planes are working together to create the sculpture that's in front of us. It can be a challenge sometimes. Check it out. This little checkered button up here will allow us to create what's called a viewport texture. Okay. Now you have to have them on. Okay, I've just turned it off. And I'm going to go into the matte caps section. Experiment with this. There's no wrong matte cap to use. It's going to apply a simple texture to our OpenGL viewport, and it'll change. Let me deselect. I got a tool on. There we go. It'll change the shading style, or the shading look, if you will, of our scene. And sometimes that small little change is all that's needed to really honestly understand the shapes that we're creating. And who doesn't like working with a little pinkish purple candle thing, right? It's also kind of fun too. Gets away from this gray world. I like color, so any opportunity to add a little color into my world is good. There's a whole bunch of them. Some of them are quite horrible, like I would never recommend that you use them. But others are honestly quite good. I tend to gravitate towards the ones that are a little bit softer. That's cool. Yeah, that one's kind of harsh. We can get these to render out. They're a little bit more difficult to render out, but we can do it. They're not going to look the same, but it is something that we can continue to pipe through our render setup. They're really helpful inside the viewport, because it just gives us some really fantastic feedback as to what we're seeing in the viewport. We get some shadows in there, some changes in color variations also helps from time to time. You know, you don't have to use these, but I find myself using them more than I don't. I try to stay away from the super reflective ones, because now the highlights showing up on the OpenGL viewport kind of get in the way. I can't tell you how many times I've sculpted something and then I've just changed the matte cap, and I'm like, oh my gosh, look, it takes on a whole new light. I can just understand it differently because my brain is interpreting the visuals, I think, very individually. Okay. So experiment, explore. There's some fun things in here. Here's what I would like you to do. Okay. Because we got about an hour left in class, more than an hour left in class. I want you guys to sculpt a little candle. Okay. Use the multi-resolution sculpting engine. Start going in and building a candle that's going to go on the inside of your jack-o'-lantern. Don't walk away from today without having a good sense of how you're going to create the illusion of your jack-o'-lantern. Okay, you'll have some class time, some lab time this afternoon to start getting that rocking and rolling. Does everyone have a good understanding of what we're doing? All right, rock and roll. Let's get to work.